Okay, so what we're going to do now is we're going to determine if we should calculate this overtime or not using the less than or equal to node. So we're going to say, is the overtime amount less than or equal to 0? So we get a number node, we change that to 0, and in this case -1 is less than or equal to 0, so that node becomes true. We connect this to the if node, so the if node is automatically going to become true. If that node is true, we use 0, so we use that number node. Just change it to a different color so we can see it easily. If it is not true, then we're going to use the calculated overtime amount. So now what we're going to do is we're going to just change the color of this if node, which is taking on the value of the real overtime, and we're going to connect that to the overtime cost. So basically we're using this amount of hours, which we know cannot be a negative number. It's either going to be 0 or the real overtime amount, and then we're going to always get the correct overtime cost. We can test it here. If we put 20 hours, we'll get 12 overtime hours, and you'll see the if node value is 12, and you'll see that the cost is 12 multiplied by the rate. If we change it to 6, we see the overtime hours is -2. So since it's -2, we use the number 0 instead. If we look at the actual if node, we should see the value is 0. See the 0 there, and you'll see the actual cost of your overtime is also $0. Now, just by looking at this, I realized that I think there's a better way to do it. Instead of using the less than or equal to node, I think the greater than node is better. And this is just for visual reasons, because in my mind, I feel like the check mark should be there if overtime is true. So I'm going to switch it up. So I'm going to say, is the overtime amount greater than 0? Right now, it's false. Overtime is not greater than 0. So we'll name this overtime true. We connect this overtime true node to the if node. Right now there is no overtime, so it's false. So what we're saying here is, if overtime is true, then we're going to use the overtime amount. If overtime is false, then we're going to use the 0 amount. So as we change it, the hours to a higher number, we see overtime is true, and then we get a real calculation. If overtime is false, then we get 0 for our cost.